Hello and welcome. Today we are going to look at the first song from Encanto, titled the Family Madrigal. In my lyric analysis here, what I'm looking for is the structure, right? How did Lin-Manuel Miranda take all of these concepts and then structure them into a song? So, like, how are the characters presented? How are the rhyme endings, consistent, or are they consistent? What are maybe some significant things about how all of this is put together? As far as like interpreting the lyrics and what they mean, I feel like there's quite a bit of that already, but there's not quite as much talking about the structure of the lyrics. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm Dr. Zach. Go ahead and grab a cup of tea and join me. All right, so let's start with just the overall structure of this piece because it's actually pretty clever the way that he does it. We have our first section kind of here, the drawers, floors, doors, let's go. And that is kind of like an introduction, right? In the movie, we are seeing like the house kind of in action. So it's, furthering this idea that the house is magical. And then the whole let's go thing kind of comes back a little bit later. So we can look at that. However, everything here except that let's go rhymes, right? Drawers, floors, doors, let's go. That gets us kind of like our AAA rhyme, and then that B rhyme breaks us out of it so we can move on to something else. All right, going back to the overall structure here, she talks about the home a little bit, but then after that, we get Abuela, right? Abuela is the one who runs the show. So we have the oldest family member first, and then after that, right, we get some Family Madrigal. We get some dialogue here when the kids are talking. And then the next character we get introduced to is Peppa. I just kind of arbitrarily picked some colors here to represent the different kind of generations. So we get Peppa, and then we get Bruno, which we then don't talk about Bruno. And then we get Julieta. Okay, so now we've got the triplets figured out. And then we have another break for the chorus. And then we get the people that the triplets married, right? Who Peppa and Julieta married. So we have Felix. And then actually, we don't get the name. We don't get Augustine here. We just get dad, right? But that is kind of an introduction. So now we have those generations figured out. All of this stuff in red is what Abuela sings. So now we have, right, like Abuela and her descendants, right? We've had all of that introduced. Then we have some more dialogue. And this brings us into the younger kids. So we have the ground kid roundup, where then we get all of these kids kind of in quick succession. We get Dolores, Camilo, Antonio, Isabella, and Luisa. Okay, so now we have all of the grandkids from Abuela's perspective, and then we get the Family Madrigal, etc. And then here at the adios, we get a kind of false ending, right? Like the song could have ended here, but the mystery of what is Mirabel's gift, right? That hasn't been solved yet. That hasn't been answered. And so they keep on pushing. What is your gift? And so then what does she do? She basically recaps the whole song, right? We've had that whole structure of oldest family member to the younger family members, right? Not quite in order because like we had Antonio before Isabella and Luisa, but nonetheless, it's going by generation. And she just basically does it again. She starts with the oldest family member, Abuela, and then she has the next generation, Peppa and Julieta, and we finally get Augustine here. We learn his name, and I mentioned kind of Mirabel here at the end of this line, and then Tia Peppa, she handles the weather, but what about Mirabel, right? Because I think this is the first time we actually hear her name in the song, which is kind of interesting. Because before it's just like, what is your gift? What is it that you do, right? But we actually get her name here at the end. So yes, Abuela, kind of her descendants and who they married. Felix is missing, but still we get mostly everyone. And then similarly, we have not every sisters, cousins, etc. Right? We get Camilo and Dolores, and then we also get my sister, right? So just kind of like how Augustine was my dad earlier. Now, this is referencing Isabella. So we don't get everyone back in this recap, but it follows that same structure of the song, starting with the oldest family members and then going to the younger family members, the youngest generation. So now let's talk a little bit about the rhyme scheme here. The way that this is presented, okay, this is our home, we've got every generation. To me, that feels more like one line. I just kind of copied these off of the internet, so this is how it was broken up online. But to me, the rhyme scheme is generation, constellation, and design and shine. Okay, so it's just this nice little A, B, A, B kind of rhyme scheme with these intermediary lines. This is our home. That's just like part of the whole line. And then we get this whoa here, which is like a little kind of vocal hook in a way. And this is especially interesting here because whoa rhymes with show, ago, grow, no, so, right? So we get this kind of vocal thing, which is really common in music. Like oftentimes we hear it as like a yeah, right? Or something like that. But we have a whoa, and all of this rhymes. So I think this word was chosen intentionally because we have the rhymes with show and ago and grow and no, so even there at the end, right? So there's a lot of like tightness in the sounds that are being used. And then here comes kind of what feels like the chorus to me, right? We have welcome to the Family Madrigal, fantastical and magical, Family Madrigal. So all of this, of course, right? It's just rhyming madrigal with madrigal with madrigal. There's a bit of a break in the third line where we get fantastical and magical, which of course both rhyme with madrigal. So that's a nice kind of tie-in. I also think it's nice that we have the same consonants. Family Madrigal, fantastical and magical. I think that helps tie it in because he could have put it the other way, right? Where all the people are magical and fantastical or something like that, right? But by having it in this order, you're matching the consonants and the order that they appear from before. And of course, this one we want to really kind of pay attention to because it's very plain in its presentation, right? Like madrigal, madrigal, madrigal. We're just getting the same word rhyming with itself the entire way. However, because of this, we're able to then tweak it a little bit every time it comes back. So for the dialogue here that I marked, there really isn't any rhyming because this is just like, conversation. This is the kids talking to Mirabelle, and so there's not really any like rhyming that needs to happen. It kind of helps differentiate, right, the song from the dialogue. Okay, for this next line, we have to look ahead a little bit too. So I think here we kind of have Peppa and weather because we have that pe sound and then weather, right? That s sound is kind of being rhymed, so it's not a super strong rhyme, but we still have that same kind of vowel sound that we're rhyming. And then we have when she's unhappy, well, the temperature gets weird, and then weird later down here is going to rhyme with disappeared. We kind of have this like a rhyme, B rhyme that's broken by Bruno, right? Which kind of makes sense because Bruno, right, is the character that we don't talk about. And so, like, kind of disrupting the rhyme here makes a little bit of sense. But yeah, weird rhymes with disappeared. So that's from the previous page. And then we have this whoa thing that comes back. And, right, we're now rhyming O with whoa. So there's a little bit of variation, which is nice. And then we have deal and meal and real and feel, right, that all rhyme together. So just like before when we had whoa, all of the end rhymes were the same. But now we've kind of like made it a little bit almost more complex in a way. Instead of rhyming like grow, whoa, we now have deal, whoa, meal, whoa, for real. So we are kind of having almost like two rhymes there at the end, but the whoa is in the background, right? So it's not quite as present. Nonetheless, the end rhyme that is most kind of obvious to us all are a, right? They all rhyme with each other, similar to how we had all the rhymes that worked together with whoa before. So there's a nice little structural thing, right? We've brought back the same rhyme scheme for when we have those woes in the chorus. Chorus meaning like background singers. Okay, and then here we have Family Madrigal again, all right? And the change here is this part. Hey coming through, right? That's the part that we have changed now, just to add that little bit of variety to it. And really, this whole thing here is kind of one idea, even though it's broken up. Two guys fell in love with the family madrigal, because this is the same musical material as the chorus. So now we have an extension of this idea, right? We've elongated how much we hear this chorus. So again, that's another little variation, right? Not just the 4 lines again, we have a couple extra bonus lines, which then takes us into the next part with how, oh, 2 guys fell in love with Family Madrigal. Well, let's hear about those 2 guys now, right? So we have Peppa and Julieta has a little rhyme in there. And then the madrigal relates back to our Family Madrigal kind of chorus idea. So it's a really kind of interesting way how Lin-Manuel Miranda just stretches this chorus idea, right? Doesn't just do, okay, we're back to the chorus, 4 lines, let's move on. We now get a little bit extra at the end. We have a different kind of exclamation in the middle, hey, coming through. We then get to learn more about the family, but still tied in Abuela Madrigal, right? That madrigal end relates to the chorus. So really kind of nice. And then here where Abuela sings, right? We have the same kind of thing where it's not always really isn't the end of the line, I think. We swear to always help those around us and earn the miracle that somehow found us, right? So the nice thing about this rhyme is it's rhyming multiple words. Around us, found us. There would have been a way probably just to rhyme us. Like this, of course, would be not as good, but like help those around us and earn the miracle that somehow came to us or appeared to us or something like that. You would still have that end rhyme, but it's not as strong as around us and found us. And then here, growing, right, is I think just part of the next line. Town keeps growing, the world keeps turning, and then we get burning rhyming with turning. So here, this is just kind of like AABB. We then get a repeat of that burning rhyme at the end, right? World keeps turning, but the work and dedication will keep the miracle burning, and each new generation must keep the miracle burning. So this is something that I feel like some people might not be comfortable with, literally rhyming like miracle burning with miracle burning, but it's really kind of driving home something important here, right? It tells you what Abuela's kind of focus is the miracle, and how important it is to keep that miracle alive. So it just adds a little bit of emphasis here, right? And by having this kind of exact rhyme at the end, I think it kind of breaks up the pattern. So we can now get into another piece of dialogue. We can now learn about the grandkids, right? So we're just kind of moving right along in the song. And having the miracle burning line happen twice, or even really just having Abuela have her own solo here, kind of helps to break up what we've had so far. All right, so now we get this okay, right? Kind of want to take a little bit of note whenever we have these little vocal hooks. So many kids in our house. Let's turn the sound up, you know why? I think it's time for a ground kid roundup. So house and round are kind of similar. Sound up, right? So sound up, round up, and then house I think is what's kind of tying into that little vowel sound there. But this one isn't quite as clear or strong, I think. But also it's a little bit more like the dialogue, right? It's almost kind of like splitting the difference between singing and speaking. So there's nothing that rhymes with okay, whereas before when we had whoa, right, there's something that rhymed with whoa. House and sound isn't quite as strong of a rhyme. And then sound up and round up works really well, but it's also a little bit obscured, right? So I think this one is probably intentionally trying to split that difference between like speaking and singing. So the rhyme structure isn't as clear or strong as it was before. Now this paragraph where we get all of the grandkids, right? This is a super quick presentation to what came before. Before we kind of like got people individually, but now we get everyone all in one stanza here. And Because of this, we don't really get any rhymes. We have like today and way is a rhyme, but like pin drop, shape shift, sisters, Louisa, graceful, it like there's not a whole lot here that rhymes. I think the reason for this is probably because these first three characters are not as central to the story as Isabella and Luisa. So if you think about it as where we have our end rhymes, right? We have Dolores, Camille, Antonio get their gift today. Antonio gets his gift today. There's the end rhyme. And then Isabella, Luisa, when strong, when graceful, perfect in every way, right? So we've kind of differentiated these groups of characters with the end rhyme to even further drive home the point that Isabella and Luisa are more important characters to the story. We get a continuation of them as a topic, right? We talk about Isabella here, then we talk about Luisa. Also in the movie, Isabella and Luisa get their own songs, right? So since they are kind of more important characters and ones that we spend more time with in the movie, they consequently get more time here. And I think by having this end rhyme, only exist like there's only two lines that really rhyme with each other, you are differentiating which characters are important, right? And Isabella and Luisa come at the end of this stanza because they are then continued to be sung about in the next stanza. So let's talk about this. Here we get some pretty solid rhymes, right? Wild and child, we get strong, and then also brawn and wrong, right? All those have those similar vowel sounds in strong, brawn, wrong. Yeah, brawn is like just missing a G. Wrong. But anyways, so great stuff here, right? Very clear that everything is rhyming here. It's strong. It's just AABB, one rhyme for each child. Then we also have this little Luisa and Isabella, right? These little kind of interjections again. And then we have the whoa that comes back for our final chorus, right? Well, the fake final chorus. So now, right, whoa comes back. And before, when we saw whoa, like the other rhymes, end rhymes were all the same. And we get that here, right? Magical, 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 right? So that whoa idea has been consistent throughout this whole song. It's only ever appeared when the end rhymes are all the same. They all rhyme with each other. And then we get the adios, right? That's the difference for this chorus. This is like, adios, we're done. There you go. Mirabelle's trying to escape telling the kids that she doesn't have a gift. So then what do we get with this continuation? We get the magical thing back, but now we have a new rhyme, right? We have autobiographical. So in this spot, it always was fantastical and magical, but now we have a new rhyme. So every time that we've had this kind of chorus figure appear, it's been a little bit different. And that I think is really important because the just rhyming madrigal with each other all the time would be uninteresting as like a listener, but by changing little things, having these different interjections, putting this autobiographical lyric at the end, right, really helps keep our interest. And then here we have the let's go. So remember at the very beginning we had let's go, and then now here at the end we have let's go, kind of framing it. And I think this is a good place for it because the rest of this is kind of like really rushed, right? Mirabelle's trying to escape the children who are pursuing her, and then she gets interrupted by Abuela at the end. So this would be, I think, the best place to kind of have that kind of like cap of beginning with let's go with the introduction and then having a let's go here, which kind of kicks off our concluding section, right? Or like almost like a coda if you want to think about it that way, or if you're familiar with that term. So then we have Abuela, Peppa, right? Julieta, and we have the wet with that sound from Peppa again with weather. So we have some kind of tighter rhymes in here, which makes sense because the rhythm has really picked up, right? And those really tight rhymes can help it feel like kind of rushed in a way, right? Like you get all those sounds again, like it just flows really well. Also, I think helps the singer to have all those similar sounds because then like it can flow a little bit better when you are singing it. And then I wanted to point out this, my dad, Augustine, well, he's accident prone, but he means well, okay? So this is an example kind of a cliche. He means well, right? I talked a bit about how Lin-Manuel Miranda uses cliches in Cabinet Battle video that I did, Cabinet Battle number 1. When you use a cliche, you have to be very careful. And Lin-Manuel Miranda always uses them very intentionally because we are rhyming Augustine with well, right? Augustine well with means well. So there's more than one word that rhymes, and we get to learn a little bit more about the character, right? It's not just some throwaway cliche that he used. This is like really intentional and I think works really well. And then here we have, today and away for those two cousins. And then we have kind of like Juana and Prima Donna are pretty close. And yo, said too much, but think you really gotta go. We don't get as consistent of rhymes, but what holds all this last bit together is everybody saying Mirabelle, right? We see that here, we see that in the previous thing, Mirabelle, but what about Mirabelle, Mirabelle, Mirabelle? So then that kind of helps it tie everything together. My family's amazing, Mirabelle, and my family so, Mirabelle, well, and then, of course, Mirabelle, well, that well rhymes with Mirabelle. So that is what I think holds this last section together. All right, and then some final thoughts here. Now that we've kind of gone through all the lyrics, right? Kind of looking at all of the facts of this piece. I just wanted to mention that like using Spanish words is one, a real talent. I would have to work pretty hard if I wanted to rhyme in a foreign language. And of course, Lin-Manuel Miranda is familiar with Spanish. I think the words that he chooses to use really add some like authenticity. This is just me speaking. I feel like it's more authentic and genuine because of the inclusion of Spanish words. And not to mention, let's look at this rhyme. Tia Pepa and Arepa, right? Rhyme. So we have like Peppa and Arepa, which rhymes with the of weather. And like, I mean, that's just so cool, so great. And this is something that Lin-Manuel Miranda does. Like in Hamilton, he rhymed some French because he had a French character in that musical. And so he was like, oh, I just have to rhyme something in French. So this is something that he's very intentional about and that he tries to work into his compositions, even when it's a language that he's not as familiar with. So that's really cool. It's a real talent, I think, to be able to do that. So with that aside, let's talk about some conclusion. All we've really done so far is just talk about the facts. We've discovered the structure, we discovered the end rhymes, but let's talk about what does this accomplish? What does this piece really do well? Well, I say for one, the structure is really well organized. We get all of the characters and then we get all of them again at the end, right? So we get a repetition of people that we need to know. We also learn who the important characters are, right? Even though it's Mirabelle singing the whole way through, which is that big kind of like main character energy, the relationship between Mirabelle and Abuela is really important, and Abuela gets her own solo in this piece. I mean, how much more important can you get? The only two singers in here are Abuela and Mirabelle. And then other important characters like Isabella and Luisa are mentioned and then kind of expanded upon, right? We get that extra stanza just about them. So we get to learn about them. And also with the family madrigal coming back over and over and over and over again, that really helps establish, right, this family. This family is important in the community. They're the subject of the story. It helps you remember the name. I don't think anybody who walks away from this song will forget that the family is called Madrigal, right? So it really establishes all these names and characters really well. We also get a little bit of a mystery about Bruno, right? He's mentioned just the one time, and then, we don't talk about Bruno, and he doesn't pop up again in the rest of the song. We also then know near the end of the song that Isabella has a suitor, right? Mr. Mariano. And of course, at the end of the song, you learn that Mirabelle has no gift, which was a little bit ambiguous from the opening of the film. So I think the chronological order of presenting was really good. It also makes more sense because the further down the family tree you go, the more characters there are. So it's easier to start with Abuela and kind of work your way down rather than starting like with all the grandkids, for example. And it gives us some little like storyline hooks to grab onto. What about Bruno? What about Mr. Mariano, right? Like there's some things that will continue our interest in watching the movie and watching the story to see kind of what happens. Now, what about what can be improved? Because that is really hard to do with Lin-Manuel Miranda's works. However, I think it's really important to try to remain critical, right? And look at everything and see if there's anything that could be worked on or, could be a little bit better, which is tough. I mean, his stuff is really good. So this is all I could kind of come up with. The less important characters, like in this case, like Dolores and Camilo and Antonio, right? I gave some reasoning, right? Some evidence for why I think there's just the two lines that rhyme with each other because it differentiates the characters, right? That's a conclusion from the evidence that I have here. It could be worked in so the rhymes were a little bit better between the characters. This is the one time that we don't really get a consistent like rhyme scheme that isn't dialogue. So like that could have been an option. But again, at this point, this is just kind of like creator preference, right? That it's not really a weak point. Similarly, anytime you get the dialogue, like there could have been some rhyme in the dialogue, but right, like but I said before, it helps differentiate it from the song. So there's a purpose why the dialogue doesn't rhyme, but it's something that he could have done. See, like I said, it's hard to find anything wrong in these pieces. Having madrigal be rhymed with itself so often throughout the piece isn't like the greatest writing, but again, I think it serves that purpose of kind of cementing that name in your memory. If this is the first time you're watching and listening to this song, like it's important that you know who the Family Madrigal is. And so getting all of that repetition, even with the repetition of right the characters in the beginning and then at the end, helps you remember what's going on, who's who, that sort of thing. So it's almost like a strength and a weakness. I think it's at its strongest when you are first, like those first impressions listening to the soundtrack or the movie, and then the more you listen, the more you're like, okay, I know who the Family Madrigal is. Why did I listen to the 20 times or whatever, however many times it is in this song? So right, so kind of strength and a weakness, I would say there. As for when this song occurs in the movie, I think it's kind of odd. And now this is something that's not at all like related to the lyrics or maybe was within Lin-Manuel Miranda's control, but nonetheless, I still wanted to mention it because it's the very first song that we get, and it's this kind of like introduction song, right? We get to know the family, we get to know a little bit more about the story, Bruno and Mr. Mariano, right? And so what I grew up on was of course the kind of Disney classics like Little Mermaid and Pocahontas, right? And the kind of model for those movies was that you speak until you get an emotion, and then that emotion turns into song, and then the further that the emotion goes, you also then dance, right? So there's this kind of like idea that songs occur at emotional high points in the movie or emotionally significant moments. And this first song being like an introductory type thing doesn't really have, at least to me, doesn't have that same kind of like strong emotional connection. And so this is just, I think, probably like the evolution, right, of including music in musicals or movies or whatever, right? It's serving some different purposes now. The purpose of this song is to introduce us to the family, and it does so really well. The kids coming up and asking about the family, I feel like is a little weak because it seems like this is the most important family in the village. Also does not seem like they get very many visitors or new people to the village. At least that was the impression that I got. So then it's like, how do these kids not know, right? They're all of the age that they would be able to ask their parents, and you're like, the parents all know that Mirabel didn't get a gift, right? So why are they asking all these questions? I don't know. There seemed to be like story wise, it would make more sense if it was like a new family in town, or if the kids knew but they wanted to hear from Mirabel. Like, oh, we know what everyone does, but we want to hear you talk about it. Sometimes that's a thing that, at least in my experience, kids like to do is hear from a specific person, hear a story from a specific speaker. So the like position in the movie feels a little strange to me, and the like reason for the song feels a little strange, from the kids kind of instigating it to also my experience growing up with these emotionally significant moments, meaning that we had a song, and this one doesn't feel as significant as those kind of things. Like, part of my world The Little Mermaid or something like that. And yes, we do get that kind of want song in the next track where Mirabelle is singing that she's waiting on a miracle. So it still happens, but in this one, we don't get that. So I don't know. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. I think maybe that's why it felt a little strange to me when I was watching the movie. So I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of the structure and some of the kind of considerations of the rhyme scheme and this type of thing. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. I am planning to do all of the songs in English for this movie. I just don't feel like I know enough Spanish to do the Spanish songs justice. Also, Howard Ho has a video on Dos Oruguitas, which is really great. And he had a Spanish interpreter help him work on that video. So if you're really interested, I would just recommend going and watching that. I'll link it in the description. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Check out my Patreon if you can. Thank you for your support. I'll see you next time. I also just wanted to point Let's Go out because it kind of seems to be a meme of Lin-Manuel Miranda.